What's going on, guys? So I got a Johnson XP 150. It's a 1988 in decent shape. Um, Motor is not locked up or anything like that. You know, she spins over. However, she's not firing up. After checking for spark, um, I found out that one of my ignition coil wires was damaged. I was just gonna replace the plug, but considering that when I checked this other power pack, it was damaged from some cut wires, I decided to just purchase both power packs. So I'm going to replace both power packs. Um, and power packs come with the ignition coil wires. So 3 for each side that take the plugs to the ignition coils here at the top. So I'm just going to go ahead and replace the coils as well and be done with it, man. I've done a couple of these in the past, and when it comes to these motors, it's almost always gonna be in your ignition coils or your power packs. There's times where it can get, a little indifferent, and you might have the issue with the stator. You have to pull the flywheel up and replace that. But for the most part, at least with the ones that I've gotten in the past, with these older motors, I mean, it's almost always gonna be the ignition coils and the power packs. So I mean, if you're a little handy, you could do this job. You don't have to pay somebody to do this job. It's really not that difficult. You just need, a basic socket set and time and patience, and just be attention to detail. You could see I got this motor, and I mean, there's stuff all over the place here, and at first glance it looks overwhelming, but it's really just following the wires. That's really all I could say is, you know, follow the wires, replace them, put new connectors, make sure you use some sort of heat gun, so that you could seal that up well, so there isn't any sort of water intrusion or salt or whatever can get to those wires. Make good connections, and you should be fine, man. So I'm gonna go ahead and get started on this, and I'm just gonna take my time. I'm gonna do one pack at a time. I'm not gonna take off more than I need to. I'm just gonna take off, the 2 screws here, and I'm gonna start by cutting these wires that are coming from the stator that my new power pack um, has. So you could see the wires are the same. Now with the new power pack, it comes with a plug. At some point this probably had a plug and they took it off and then they spliced the wires. That's fine, you can do it that way. Obviously I would have preferred the plug, but it is what it is. On this side it was spliced. On this side you could see there's an actual plug itself. I could order this plug and install it on the other side so that it has the plug, but it is what it is. I'm trying to get this thing's been sitting for a while. I just got these parts in. I'm dying to hear it purr. So like I said, I'm just gonna make some good connections, make sure they're nice and sealed, and you know it's an 88, man. You know what I mean? As long as everything's connected well and sealed up and she's purring, that's really all that matters to me. Doesn't matter. It doesn't have to look super pretty. Um, so anyhow, yeah, man, we're gonna get started here. So stay with me. All right. So I got a size. Looks like an 11, and like I said, um, we're just gonna start by unbolting the. Sorry, I'm trying to do this with one hand here. All right. Start by unbolting the power pack, and you want to obviously pay attention to where everything is located. I mean, that's one of the good reasons why, recording this is worth it, because if I need to, if I get caught up with something, I can always go back. Um, so this first wire here that's connected here is the ground wire to the actual power pack itself. So let's just go ahead and keep everything together, and I'll eventually put that back there. But so this is my ground wire here, to the power pack. All right, and we're gonna go ahead, take this guy out here. All right, and just pull it out slowly. And this is the reason why I seen this previously. I didn't even have to take the screws off to actually see how bad these wires were. I came around, it was sometimes it's crazy, but at nighttime you could actually see things a lot better with a flashlight than in the pure daylight. I don't know what it is, but for some reason sometimes it works out better like that. And I had came out to the back one night, and I was saying to myself, what is going on here? Why isn't this thing firing up? It has to be something stupid, I guarantee you. And when I come over with my flashlight and I look, I noticed that these wires here were damaged. So right away I knew, okay, yeah, that shouldn't look like that, right? Regardless, whatever that wire is and for what it's for, it shouldn't look that way. So let's replace it. And so that's what we're doing. So anyhow, so ground wire, brown and yellow, brown. I believe this comes from the timer base, the stator timer base underneath the flywheel. If you follow the wires there, that's where it leads to. So I'm not a mechanic, man. I'm honestly not a mechanic, but this stuff really isn't rocket science. A lot of it's common sense and just plug and play. So if you have a little common sense, and you understand at least, how these motors are supposed to run, the three main components that make these outboards run, then you should be fine. So I'm gonna just go right ahead and unplug this guy. So there's these metal clips, and basically if you just push on the metal clip, I'm literally doing this with one hand. Push on one side, push on the other side, the little metal clip will come right off. And then this guy, if you just take your time and work your way around it, go raising it up little by little. Hold on, maybe I should use two hands. Give me a second. Let's see if I can set this down here for a second. All right. So I went ahead and all I did was unplug both of these connections here. So your brown and yellow, and then your colored wires, okay, that are running down. So basic plug and play, right? Took those off. Now, this connection here, this black and yellow wire, this is a wire that everyone should know what it does, because this wire right here, this wire I've seen cause more issues in outboards than any other wire. This is your kill wire. And basically, if this isn't plugged in properly, your motor is not going to start. And I've also seen it where your motor starts and it won't shut off. So this is a very important wire. And so this wire here, this kill wire it follows through, it connects to another black wire that they use to run it over to this side. And then that comes over across the top, and it junctions with the other kill wire on the other power pack, which then goes to the kill wire, the black and yellow, off the actual harness itself. So, and then this follows through and it goes all the way over to your ignition switch. So this wire right here causes more problems than anything else. And you always just want to, check this wire if you're ever having issues with your outboard not starting and things like that. This is like one of the first wires that you want to check. If you're not getting any sort of crank or anything like that. So this kill wire can be super problematic. All right, so I'm gonna come back over here, and basically I'm gonna have to obviously reconnect this here, because this one's coming off of this power pack, and then now we have the new one. So I'm just gonna go ahead and snip it on this side, and I'm gonna try to keep as much of this wire possible, right? Because I don't want to cut this wire and just go making it smaller. So, and then these three wires here, you need to be aware that they all have their orientation. At least from a common sense standpoint, they all have orange, but one has orange and blue, one has orange and green, and the other one I believe has another orange and another color. So I'm going to be mindful of that. And so because this is an old power pack and I'm not keeping it, I'm going to snip it right here so that I don't have to go replace, taking it off here at the actual ignition coils and worrying about, oh, which one was this one for the top and this one for the middle, etc. I'm just going to clip it right here so that when I get to that point, I can literally just look at that wire and say, oh, okay, this is the orange and green one. So I'm going to go ahead and from my new power pack, I'm going to go ahead and just follow the wire. So for example, this is orange and purple. And this one here is orange and blue. And then the other one is orange and green. So, like I said, maybe a mechanic knows, oh, okay, this is supposed to be this one, this and that one, but I don't. So I'm just going to go ahead and pay attention to the fact that this one is orange and green. So obviously that's where I'm going to plug in my new orange and green at, right? So this is the reason why I'm not just unplugging everything and just, and then hoping I get it right later on, because that's how you could run into problems. So just clip it on this end, take your time, put our new power pack, run the plugs, and then once I get to this point, then I can individually go, okay, let me take off this ignition coil, put my new ignition coil with my spark plug cable and the color that it takes for the ignition wire, and that's it. And then I'll go one by one. So that's what I'm going to be doing now, so stay with me. All right, so I went ahead and, like I said before, I cut the ignition wires on the back end over here, and I left everything plugged in on this side because later on I don't want to get confused on what color ignition wire goes to what ignition coil. So I want to keep everything consistent. Now I'm going to put my new power pack on. Now when you do this, you want to be careful because these wires are on the back here, and you don't want to apply too much pressure, because a lot of times that's how these wires end up breaking, because of the pressure that they apply on the back of these wires and then screwing it back in onto the block. So you want to make sure that you pull the wires in the direction that they need to go in the proper orientation. So in this case, I know that my ground wire is going to go to this bottom screw, how it was previously. Over here I have my mixed colored wires, which is, I'm sorry guys for this horrible video here, but I'm trying to do this all with, basically just my hands here. So my color wire, I'm going to pull this wire onto this side because I know that that's going to plug in that side. Same thing with my brown wires, my brown plug. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pull it to this side, and that's going to go over here. And then my ignition wires, are going to pull to the left. So before you install this thing, you want to make sure that everything is in its right orientation in the position that it's going to go. That way you're not pulling wires after it's screwed in and then causing, maybe a wire to break or pull out. So I'm going to just go ahead and I'm going to screw this down, and I'll be right back. All right, so I went ahead and I bolted down my new power pack. One thing I want to point out here, when you go to put this back on, this housing is a hard plastic, so you don't want to over tighten this because you're going to crack the housing. I like to just hand tighten it at first, make sure that my bolts are going in right, and then once I see that everything is going in, then I'll go ahead and I'll take my socket wrench, and I'll gradually go tightening it. And like I said, this isn't something that has to be torqued down to some sort of specification, because it honestly, it's plastic, and if you over tighten this, you're gonna break it. So you want to just get it tight to the point where obviously the power pack isn't gonna move, but it's secured. All right. And like I said before, be careful, be mindful of the back, the way the wires are going, so that you're not putting too much pressure on the wires against the block. Now, one of the nice things is that there was an area here that kind of had like an indentation that went back further. So what I did was I tried to make sure that that was the area where my actual cables would fall back into, so that they're not being pinched or I'm sorry, I'm off here, so that they're not being pinched or being applied too much pressure. So like I said before, I have two wires that are running this way, which is my browns, my plugs. So all I'm going to do now is just plug them in. Now, these plugs, they have an orientation on them, right? So this is a half moon here. So I'm going to look at this side, and I'm going to say, okay, 3 on the bottom, 1 on the top. Okay, I got 3 on the bottom here, 1 on the top, and that's how it's going to get plugged in. There's only one way to do this. You can't mess it up. But be mindful of that, because these little pins are actually pretty delicate, and I've seen them break before. So I'm just going to go ahead and plug up these two and be done with this side. All right, so these are plugged up. One of the things I noticed though, on this brown and yellow wire on this power pack, this one here has a more of an opening here to allow those plugs to plug in. This one here didn't. It was a little bit tighter, so I hope this doesn't give me an issue. I plugged it in as best as I could, and I'm hoping that it actually went in and made connection with those two plugs. But that's something that I may need to check later on, double check. If I'm having any issues, I have to come back to this and see how I can make these two. I mean, worst case scenario, what I end up having to do, if this plug is not pressing in down, I'm just gonna have to splice these wires coming off the pack into these wires here. I hate to do that, I rather have a plug, but it is what it is, that you got to be able to make a good connection. So all right, so what's left? My black and yellow kill wire that I mentioned about a little while ago. Now, the one on the new power pack has a nice plug on it. Unfortunately, this cable doesn't have a plug, and they used the wrong splice connector, in my opinion. I don't like these plastic ones, only because they don't seal, and you could see here, that wire is basically exposed. Anything can get in there and shorten that out, and that's not good. So I'm going to do a watertight connection. These are the type of connections you want to have. Your heat shrink type connections. These type of connections, these plastic connectors, I don't recommend it for outboards, guys. This is something that, the previous owner did. And it'll work, not that it won't, but you're basically, you're exposing yourself to something happening later on. So at one point I'm going to end up replacing these two here with some heat shrink connections, so that everything is nice and sealed. So my black and yellow wire, and then my three ignition wires that are gonna go to my three ignition coils. So this wire will end up running through here, through this grabber here, and then that'll come through, and then it'll split off the way it goes. Just, be mindful of the colors. So what I'm gonna go ahead and do now is I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna go ahead and start with the top ignition coil. I'm gonna take it out. I have new ignition coils, and I'll put that description in the link below, and I'll also put the description for the power packs that I purchased. These are Sierra power packs. They're aftermarket power packs. They're not the OEM ones. I would have preferred those, but honestly, I couldn't pass up on the price on these power packs. Now, hopefully, um, you know that the old saying, "You get what you pay for," doesn't hold true here. I hope that these Sierra ones are just as good, but we'll see. We'll see how it turns out. So, all right. So, ignition coil time. All right, let's do that. By the way, guys, these clips, I forgot to put it back on. I'm gonna go ahead before I move on to those ignition coils. I'm just gonna go ahead and put these clips back in, so that everything is properly connected as it should be. So. All right, so I went ahead and I put those clips back on, and now I'm gonna go ahead and move over to the ignition coils. Now the ignition coils, the bolts on these are 10s. So I'm gonna start with the top one here. One of the things that I like to do before I replace my ignition coils, and this tends to work sometimes, not all the time. I mean, these ignition coils, as you can see, they're already starting to crack here on the gel, so they look like they're in pretty rough shape. But if you have some ignition coils and they're not as bad as these, one of the first things you want to do, especially if you're getting the motor to crank on, but for example, you're out there and you're not getting enough power, one of the things that I've noticed is that with time, these metal tabs here, they corrode, right? And these are supposed to be making a good connection here. So if these are corroded, you're not going to get a good ground connection to your coil, and that's going to be an issue. So you want to take these off. Let me go ahead and pull one of these off here. Let me loosen this up a little bit more, and then just take a little bit of sandpaper, and take the sandpaper to the metal plates and get all that corrosion off. And you'll be surprised, man. Sometimes that could be the fix to the problem. I already did that here, and I wasn't getting spark at all, so I knew it was something else. I knew that it had to do with the power pack, but in the case where you're getting spark but you have a weak spark, and that'll show in your throttle acceleration. When you get out on the water, you start to throttle down and you're just not getting that power that you should be getting. This right here, man, this almost always fixes the issue for something like that. So you got to be getting a good connection with your ignition coils, good ground connection. So let me see if I can do this here with one hand. All right, good thing I got it loose enough. All right. All right. So I'm just gonna place these here on top of the flywheel. And guys, I'm not a YouTuber. Please don't judge me on my video skills. I'm just doing this because honestly, I've been doing this for a while now. I tend to just do it and never record it, but I figured, you know what, man, it's, let me see if I can help somebody else out. So here's my ignition coil. There's a part number for the ignition coils for this Johnson. And these ignition coils, believe it or not, they're pretty standard. I can't recall right off the top of my head right now from what year to what year, but when I looked them up, I mean, it seemed like these applied to most of the higher horsepower Johnson, Evinrude's, obviously the same thing. So, but always refer. I like to go to like marineengine.com first and cross-reference and make sure that I'm getting the right one for the right year and model. So, all right, and then so here we go. So when you get a lot of buildup of corrosion here. Now there's not a lot of corrosion here because, like I said, I had already sanded this down, and I also sand the actual block itself, because, like I said, this is supposed to be getting a good ground connection here to this coil. So always check this, guys. I can't stress it enough. Always check this when it comes to your ignition coils, that you have a good non-corroded surface here for these metal plates to your block. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and start taking these off, but I'm gonna put my phone down because I really can't do this with one hand. So I just want to point this out just one more time. I know I've said this already a couple times, but if you notice, this wire here is an orange and blue wire. All right, when I come over here to my ignition wires, this is an orange and purple, this is an orange and green, there's my orange and blue right there. All right, so this wire here is going to be fed here through the top because this is the one that's going to go to my top ignition coil. All right, so it's that simple. And then I'm just going to unplug my spark plug wire off the ignition coil. I don't need to touch the one coming off of the actual head. I'm just going to unplug it here, plug everything back together, and bolt it on, and then move on to the next ignition coil. Alright, so one of the little issues that I ran into was the fact that I want to be able to run these wires nicely across the back of the head here. And unfortunately, I have to take off this second ignition coil to be able to do that. So I'm just going to recall that this is, orange and blue at the top. And just stick it right here so it doesn't move on me. And now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to unplug number 2 and pull this one out and just look at the color real quick. And it looks like it's orange and green, which I think one of the things that they did here is they kind of helped us out here because they went ahead and they put the smaller ignition wire. There's a difference. You see, 2 of them are longer, 1 of them is shorter. So common sense tells me that the shorter one obviously is for the middle, which is going to be the orange and purple. Okay, all right. Alright guys, so I went ahead, I had to take that second ignition coil off, like I said, because I needed to be able to run this cable here, the ignition wire cables, nice across, so I could properly orientate it. I could have probably ran this one underneath here, but considering that this had a clip here, I decided to just keep it with the clip and let it just follow through here on the back side. One thing to take into consideration is, attention to detail. These wires come with this black sleeving. Obviously, these motors, they get hot when they're running, so you want to make sure that, especially if it's anywhere near the block, that you don't have any wires exposed You want to make sure that that black sleeving is covering it up real nice. You could always take some like black electrical tape and come back and throw some tape around these areas where the sleeving is meeting the thicker sleeving. That way, you know that it's nice and sealed. Also, take into consideration when you're running cables up and down like this, that before you go screwing it down, that you don't pinch any cables. So, like this ignition wire here, it's running underneath this coil here. Since this is that short one, I don't have a lot of room to play with it, so I had to make sure that it's not going to get pinched here up against the block. That would obviously cause issues later on. Then I just throw my bolts on, and I'm literally just with the socket tightening it down, and then I'll come back with the wrench itself and just give it like a half a turn. These are pretty hard plastics. I've never cracked one, but I'm sure if you apply too much pressure, you could potentially crack it. So I'm literally just tightening these all down with the socket in my hand. And like I said, I'm gonna come back and just give it a half a turn. But even with this, they're nice and secure. They're not going anywhere. So I mean, you could look at the difference between this coil, that new coil, and then look at this old coil. So, and this is a relatively cheap fix, guys. I mean, you know, between the two power packs and the ignition coils, you know, I think I got everything for under $300, you know, something like that. So to get you back on the water, it's a small investment, and I highly recommend you do that, especially if you have an old outboard and you're having issues with it cranking on. Obviously, check for spark first, check for compression, make sure you have good compression, because obviously it's not even worth it for you to work on a motor that has low compression, unless you plan on actually replacing the pistons, and or sometimes it might just be the head gasket. A lot of people overlook that, man, when it comes to low compression. I don't want to get off topic, but I had one outboard before that had low compression, and all I had to do was replace the head gasket. And while I was at it, I replaced the water jacket gasket, which is this side here, and this is your main head gasket here. Once you take that off, you know, you have the gaskets exposed, and you have the internal, well, the exterior part of the cylinder, the inside of the block exposed, and you could sit there and you can clean it all with a nice little wire brush, and any little holes where water should be passing through, you want to clear all those holes, and that takes away a lot of these low compression issues or overheating issues. If you're getting overheat, if you ran your outboard a lot in salt water and you're getting overheating, that tends to be one of the issues as well. Those holes start to get clogged up over time. Even though we try our best to flush our motors, and you know, every time we go out on the water, salt water, at least I do. I mean, every time I take a boat out, you know, I come home, I don't care what time it is, I'm running water through that motor for at least 10 minutes, and flushing out as best as I can, because it's obviously going to extend the lifetime of the motor. So salt, man, salt can be the enemy. So, well, it is the enemy. Unfortunately, it's the friend when it comes to fishing, it's the enemy when it comes to our outboards. So all right, so I'm going on to the third one now. So this one's just straightforward. I'm going to take off that third ignition coil. I already have my new wire down here, that's going to plug in. This is the old ignition, which, like I said, you know, some people just come and they unplug everything, and if you do that, that's fine. You know, just make sure that you keep a good eye on, you know, what goes where, because you know, it's the little things sometimes that just cause the biggest headache. So all right, I'm going to the third one. All right, guys, so my 3 ignition coils are installed. um, Everything's installed as should. Spark plug wires are going to the corresponding ignition coil, so that looks good. Same thing with the ignition wires. Everything is nice and plugged up. You want to make sure everything is nice and sealed. Nothing is making any contact with the block. Everything um, is protected, right? Because, you know, like I said, these things, they get hot, and you don't want these wires rubbing up against the actual block itself. Um, like this wire here, this, honestly, they had something going on here. I have no idea. The brown wire is typically the thermostat wire, and that's what they got going on here, or the, you know, it detects when the motor overheats, etc. So I don't even think this wire is doing anything. So honestly, I'm I'm just gonna remove it because I don't like seeing stuff like this. So, um, but yeah, my 3 ignition coils are in, man. Now all I gotta do on this end is we plugged up everything with the exception of, remember, our kill wire, black and yellow wire. I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna make a connection here, um, and I'm just gonna use a um, 16 gauge. I actually need to get more of these. I'm going to use a 16 gauge heat shrink connection. So this right here, you heat it up and then it seals it up just like what you see going on right here. And then if you want even more protection, um, you know, this one already has it. It has a sleeve on it, but throw a sleeve on it, like a heat shrink sleeve. And same thing, warm it up a little bit and it'll melt over the connection, and it'll be nice and sealed. So I'm gonna go ahead and make this connection now, and then we should be good um, with this side of the motor. So, and then we'll basically just repeat the same thing on the other side, guys. The only difference on this side is I got a little bit more work cut out for myself, because for one, I have to do this connection here as well, with my black and yellow coming off the power pack and the one that's coming from the other power pack. So I'll need to make this connection, um, and this one as well, because this is the side that doesn't have a plug. So it's not going to be as easy as just plug and play over here. I'm going to have to cut all these, and I'm going to cut as much as I can on this side, right? Because I want to salvage as much wire as in here, because you could tell this wire already is shortening up, and I'll have to, you know, check it with my power pack cable wires. I think that one comes with a long enough one, so I should be all right. But when you have these type of scenarios going on, you know, think, you know, what is it, measure twice, cut once. Same thing here, right? You want to measure, make sure that everything is gonna square up right before you start cutting all this stuff, because you're only working with a set amount of wires. And if I mess up here, then guess what? Now I have to order a new timer base or stator, and I'm gonna find myself, you know, in the hole another $300. So just think about what you're doing before you do it, and take your time with it. And that's gonna be it. I'm not gonna film me doing this. Maybe I might film doing the heat shrink connection, if I can get my GoPro over here. But if not, man, this is pretty straightforward. There's tons of videos of guys creating heat shrink connections online that you could watch. So, and then I'll definitely shoot a video of the motor running, um, and we'll be back in business. We'll be back on the water. So, hey, I wish you all the best, man, with your projects, with your outboards. Um, you know, I love these old two-stroke motors, because honestly I feel like they're great to work on. They're pretty easy to work on. Um, you know, I have a four-stroke as well. I have a four-stroke, brand new four-stroke Suzuki 150, which I love. Super quiet motor, super fuel efficient. You know, doesn't do all the smoke and all that. So obviously, I mean, I love the four strokes. But I love these guys too, man, because these guys right here, you know, these things were built to last. I don't care what anybody says. These motors, you know, this is a 1988 motor, guys. 1988. Think about that for a second. I mean, I'm giving out my age here, but I was 8 years old. I was 8 years old when this motor came out. I'm 42 years old, and this motor is still kicking, man. So when these guys made these motors, man, they really thought it through, and they did a hell of a job. If all I got to do is replace a couple $100 in parts, you know, every couple years or whatever, it is what it is, man. You know, you can't go wrong. If especially if you're just getting into boating and you can't get something like that that's, you know, super expensive. You know, I mean, it took me like 10 years, guys, to finally get a brand new motor. You know, it's, you know, for the average working guy, um, you know, I wish I could have done it back then, but I couldn't, you know. So I had to, you know, learn how to work on these guys, and I'm glad I did, man. I'm glad that I got the experience of working on these old two strokes, because they really are exceptional motors. So, all right, fellas. Anyhow, I don't want to talk your ears off. I just wanted to kind of show the process, but once again, of, you know, installing new power packs. It's almost always going to be something. You know, if your motor's turning over, if it's spinning when you try to crank it, you're just not getting it to actually fire up. It's your electrical system, guys. It's somewhere in your electrical system, almost always. Unless when you go to crank it, it actually turns over and then shuts off on you. Now you're probably looking at a fuel issue. So, you know, check your carburetors, make sure that you got good fuel, clean fuel running to your motor. Um, you know, it's always going to be something like that when it's actually turning on and then shutting back off. But if it's not turning on at all and the flywheel's spinning, then it's in your electrical system. It's either going to be your power packs, which in this case this motor has two, um, you know, or it's going to be your stator, your timer base that are underneath your flywheel here, um, which is a little bit more tricky to install, because obviously you have to, now you got to have the tools, the proper tools to take this flywheel off and etc. But after that, after you take the flywheel off, I mean, it's pretty simple, because you could see it's really just plug and play. And then when you take this off, just follow the same orientation how everything was, and you should be all right. But that would obviously be a little bit more tricky as far as the flywheel goes. But if it's outside of the flywheel, it's, you know, going to be your power packs, which I just showed you guys is super simple. Your ignition coils. I I hardly ever see it being your spark plugs or your spark plug cables. These are good, obviously. They're cheap and they're good to replace every so often, right? Spark plugs don't cost but a couple bucks each. So obviously check that. Um, but it's not, it's almost never gonna be that. It's almost always gonna be in this guy right here, in these power packs. They just, you know, they have a certain amount of lifespan, man, and after a while they just burn out. So um and then your ignition coils. Anyhow, all right, I'm out of here, guys. Man, it was great doing this for you guys. I enjoyed it. And so I think I might start doing more of these videos. You know, I just need to set up my video presentation a little bit better. But I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you like this video, man, like and subscribe. Leave a comment, whatever, you know what I'm saying. If obviously, you know, like I said, I'm not a mechanic. I'm doing this off of my own previous experience and knowledge and my own research that I did online. Thanks to a lot of guys out there that, you know, started doing this early on, showing how to do this. So, you know, leave a couple comments, whatever, man. It was good chatting with y'all. You guys take care. See you out on the water, man.